the word legend is often used and overused, particularly when it comes to motorsport. This chap here, Mr. Richard Attwood, I think it's fair to say you're a bit of a legend, sir. And I'll tell you why. In fact, it's for two reasons, if you don't mind me saying. First of all, because he was the first Porsche driver ever to win a Le Mans race in 1970. The first of, how many have there been since? 19?
19, yeah.
19.
Yeah.
And the second I'll come back to. But Richard Attwood, thank you for talking to me.
Okay, no problem at all. We're in the right place.
We are.
Everybody's Porsche here, so that's fine.
Well, and behind, I think we're standing in front of the car that you raced in 1970.
Well, yeah, it was a bit bigger than that. It made more noise.
So a model of the 917, similar to the 1970 car that Richard would have raced. 14 grand apparently, so but not quite as quick as the one that you drove.
No.
A couple of questions, if I may. I'm fascinated by your career. What I'm really fascinated about is how on earth drivers like you in the 1960s got on with the conditions of the day. So we that watch Formula One races now, we see drivers with their halos and their driver aids and all of the very
all
the very necessary things that obviously have been progressed over the years. Tell us about what it was like to race a car at Le Mans or in a Formula One environment in the 1960s.
Well, it was the conditions of the day were acceptable because, you know, if you didn't do it, then somebody else would just move into your place and take a drive. But
what didn't you have then that you would expect now as a racing driver in a modern era? What didn't you have back in the 1960s? So, for instance, you raced without seatbelts, didn't you?
Yeah. But I mean, seatbelts hadn't been invented, and there was no point in some cars having belts on, in the single seater particularly, because you might stand a better chance of being thrown away from the car
at 200 miles an hour.
Well, preferably not at that speed, but if it was catching fire or something. And it was an easier exit, whereas now you're strapped into a car that's got a safety cell and everything else. But also the tracks we raced on, a lot of the continental tracks were on normal roads. So there were telegraph poles and banks and ditches and, you know, rocks and God knows whatever else.
So maybe no barriers, no runoff. So if you went off, so for instance down the Mulsanne Straight at Le Mans, not like it is today, which is somewhat safe I suppose, but you could go off and hit the side of a house.
Well, yeah, or a tree. Anything that causes, you know, a stop like that is going to hurt.
So I have to ask the question, how on earth are you still alive?
Well, I did have one or two problems, but got through them.
Clearly.
Yes.
Well, hence I used the word legend at the beginning of this interview, because it's clear that you really are.
Yeah, it's something that it's just a passing of an era, isn't it, really? Because you're talking about 50, 60 years ago, and things should improve, and they should have improved, and they would have improved quicker maybe, but Jackie Stewart was the guy who started the reasons of safety and Armco barrier and all sorts of things like that.
So he was really the catalyst that started
he was.
A move towards more driver safety.
Yeah, he was, and he was right, because he had a bad crash at Spa. I had a bad crash at Spa the year before, where either one of us could have easily died, and he thought something should be done about it. But you know, he had no real support from all the other drivers.
So why didn't the drivers also want to fall in behind him in terms of making things safer?
I think it was seen as not being as pure. I don't know. But
the danger being part of the thrill and the exhilaration and the spectacle of the race?
Well, Sterling Moss always said that, you know, the danger was something that got your attention. And it made it different to if it was sanitized, which it is now. And but that, I mean, if you take it back to World War II, where hundreds of thousands of people got killed, and in a war zone, and you know, to kill one driver really didn't count. You know, it's
so it was seen as the human being was almost kind of conditioned to that kind of fate, so it didn't matter as much as perhaps it does now, when you know, we're more acute about such things.
I think it's very much more difficult to die in a car today than it ever was back in our day. And every year, 3 or 4 top drivers would die. Jim Clark's a classic case, and when he died, we all said to ourselves, "Gosh," because he'd never had any blood come out of his body, and you know, we thought if it can happen to him. But you know, it made you feel even more vulnerable.
And thankfully now, obviously, we don't see it very much in modern sport at all, in modern motorsport. Yeah. Tell me, what was your hairiest moment as a driver? Can you talk us through it? What we would think is your hairiest moment. Maybe you don't think it is, but
I don't really go into that too much because it's quite thought-provoking for me anyway. But we had scrapes, yes, and at that time it's the luck of the draw whether you survived or not.
Wow.
And, if you crash like some of the cars crash today, but there were our cars in that day, you wouldn't even bother to go and see if the driver's alive because we know he'd be dead.
Okay, a less probing couple of questions. Favourite circuit that you've ever driven?
Well, I did have one, and it was a very exceedingly dangerous track called Clermont-Ferrand in southern France, and it was built around a mountain. And it was so dangerous because you went down a very long, fast straight into a hairpin bend at the bottom, went to the right. And I mean, if you had a mechanical problem, you were going to die. So,
if you didn't have any brakes or you couldn't change down gear to slow down, you'd be done.
Yeah, if you made a mistake.
Okay, one more question. I'm going to let you go. Thank you, because Richard's been signing autographs for about an hour here. You might not want to answer this, but I hope you do. Taking all of the Formula One drivers that there's ever been, so all the way from the 2030s, all the way to now, who is the best on balance? Who's the best F1 driver ever?
You can't. It's always said you can't compare one era to another. You could go with Fangio, Nuvolari, Jim Clark, Sterling Moss, Jackie Stewart. They're all different eras, but the cars would be driven in a different way. And I think, in general, it's usually in not the fastest car that you find the true champion of a race car. And we had, for instance, you had Damon Hill in a Williams, but then he drove an Arrows once, and he nearly won a race at Hungary.
Yeah.
That to me stood him up above a lot of drivers because he could prove it
in two different cars.
Not in the best car.
Well, and of course Fangio, though, didn't he win 5 championships across 4 different teams? So I mean, he must count as being up there.
Fangio, of course, I did forget Fangio, but of course he did. And for his era, Sterling even said he was the best. But Sterling in a sports car would wipe the floor with him.
Really? So horses for courses, literally.
I think in general, Nuvolari seems to be most motorsport fans over the decades would say Nuvolari because he drove cars that weren't always competitive.
Richard Attwood, thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Thank you, sir. Cheers.
Thank you.